in your eyes. The same fear that would take the heart of me. A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day. An hour of wolves and shattered shields when the age of men comes crashing down. But it is not this day. This day we fight. By all that you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West!
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Judge Moore has also said that he doesn't think a Muslim member of Congress should be allowed to be in Congress. Why? Under what provision of the Constitution?
Because you have to swear on the Bible. When you are before, I had to do it. I'm an elected official, 3 terms. I had to swear on a Bible. You have to swear on a Bible to be an elected official in the United States of America. He alleges that a Muslim cannot do that ethically, swearing on the Bible.
You don't actually have to swear on a Christian Bible. You can swear on anything, really. I don't know if you knew that. You can swear on a Jewish Bible.
Oh, no, I swore on the Bible. I've done it 3 times.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you've picked a Bible, but the law is not that you have to swear on a Christian Bible. That is not the law. You don't know that? All right, Ted Crockett. With
I don't know. I know that Donald Trump did it when we made him president.
Because he's Christian and he picked it. That's what he wanted to. That's what he wanted to swear in on. Ted Crockett with the More campaign. Good luck tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
It is Wednesday, December 13th of 2017, and the doors are now open at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Our daily special is, well, if it's Wednesday, it's Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Oh, yes. Well. Roy Moore's spokesman yesterday, that was with Jake Tapper, by the way, on CNN. Before the vote was, the polls were closed. Went on CNN and told Jake Tapper that, there's no way that Doug Jones could win because he apparently didn't promise to swear on the Bible during a swearing-in ceremony. And according to Roy Moore's spokesperson or spokesman, it's the law. It's the law. And, of course, it's not the law. And, quite a bit of silence. It literally left him speechless, or as I like to say, dumbfounded. Ooh. Alrighty. Well, folks, another big news day, and the big one is out of Alabama, of course. So far, Roy Moore has not conceded, and even though the margin of victory is larger than what would trigger an automatic recount in the state, Roy Moore thinks that he's going to get a recount. He was not able to raise a lot of money during the campaign. Money was poured in, but he didn't bring it. And maybe he'll find a rich benefactor to fund this recount. Or maybe he'll come to reason. I know. Evangelical, right-wing, bigot, racist, misogynist pedophiles don't usually live their lives with reason, as evidenced by one Roy Moore, twice fired from the Supreme Court because of his unreasonable behavior. Unreasonable behavior. Well, they didn't kick him out just because of unreasonable behavior. What was the behavior? Well, not following the law. Alrighty. Oh, I should mention, folks, if you go to netrootsradio.com and you scroll to the bottom of the homepage, because that is the homepage, of course, you'll see the chat room link at the rightish of the homepage down there. And do get in there if you have any ideas or concerns or question or whatnot. Roaring Girl, Kelly Lincoln, does monitor that quite closely during the day. And you can also get a hold of me at Justice Putnam on Twitter or at Daily Kos, same, Justice Putnam. And but more importantly in this season of giving, to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of the homepage are the donate contribute buttons, and your generosity pays our bills, and we are very, very thankful, especially in this time of giving. So thank you for that generosity once again. Oh, and I do promise that podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy will be available soon. Just a few technical issues, and some of these platforms take a little time when you have a show, and a new one, of course. We've had issues at Netroots Radio over the years, even when the names of the shows didn't change. And I'm looking at you, iTunes. Yeah. Okay, but we'll get on all the. We're all. Well-respected podcasts can be found. We'll be there. So thanks so much. All right. Outside of the vote and election in Alabama, which was that surprising? Maybe. I was not holding out a whole lot of hope because I know how pervasive voter suppression is in the state. And, of course, those work only on the margins. And Roy Moore, let's remind ourselves, never won by very large margins. There were no margins in his victories. And his elections would be in off years, non-presidential elections, where voter turnout is traditionally low. That's how they win, is with really low voter turnout. And there were some counties in Alabama that were 70, 80% of the vote from 2012. Yeah, I guess you could say, well, let's be honest here. Black women saved the Democratic Party in Alabama. Well, let's just be clear. All right. What else are we attending to today in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, we have been diligently at work in the kitchen. And in the front cafe today, what we have on the menu is, well, we're going to explore how Russian-speaking hackers have silently stolen millions of dollars from banks since May of 2016. Even the Republican senator who masterminded the plot to steal Merrick Garland's Supreme Court seat now thinks Trump's judicial picks are just a little too extreme. Grassley. God, I hate that guy. And Trump's senior environmental nominee, is busted for plagiarizing her responses to Congress. Wow. And she didn't plagiarize it from Hillary or Melania. Interesting. Well, then, of course, after the break, we move everything back to the chef's table, and we'll have a deep discussion on how both public and private financial institutions have rebuked Trump's climate agenda by moving investments away from fossil fuels. Well, they know. Actuaries in the insurance companies, too, they'll tell you. And an extremely rare Charles Darwin letter sells at auction for $125,000, which was double what they had expected. Oh, and it's a rare letter where he reconciles the theory of evolution with a belief in God. And interesting. So all that and more, because there's always more. It's a cornucopia of abundance here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. All right, looks like we're about ready to serve up the first dishes here at the front cafe. So why don't we just dig right in? So this first article is by Anthony Cuthbertson out of Newsweek. A previously unknown group of hackers dubbed Money Taker has stolen millions of dollars from banks around the world in silent online heists, according to a report by a cybersecurity firm. The Money Taker hacking group, detailed in a report by Moscow-based group IB shared with Newsweek, targeted at least 20 organizations in the U.S., the UK, and Russia from May of 2016. It is not clear which country the group is from, though the report said that Money Taker is Russian-speaking. I might interject that Roy Moore, even though it was a simple homily and a greeting, spoke pretty darn good Russian. So just because they're Russian-speaking doesn't necessarily mean they're from Russia, does it? Well, I don't know. I think that they may have similar likes, wouldn't you say? Well, this is a sophisticated group of hackers, Dmitry Volkov, head of threat intel at Group IB, told Newsweek. Money Taker managed to gain access to isolated segments of critical banking systems using tools, tactics, and this is what's scary, trace elimination techniques that enabled them to go unnoticed for a long period of time. The majority, and this really bugs me too, the majority of the group's victims were small community banks based in the U.S., with an average damage for each successful attack estimated at around $500,000. And at least one of those banks was successfully robbed twice. Russian-speaking. Only the majority of the victims were small community-based U.S. banks. Well, as well as Money Taker also stole data and documents relating to payment systems, which could potentially be used for future attacks. Okay. One of the pieces of documentation was for a card processing system called Ocean Systems FedLink, used by around 200 banks in the U.S. and Latin America. Moneymaker continues to pose a threat, Volkov said, given their propensity to change target region after a series of successful attacks, and taking into consideration their interest in Latin American-focused systems, we predict this may be a future target for the group. Attacks in Russia focused on an interbank transfer system that proved even more lucrative than the attacks on U.S. organizations. Banks targeted by this method of attack by money taker lost an average of $1.2 million per incident. Maybe they're the kids from Macedonia. Maybe. Despite being in operation for a year and a half, the hackers were able to remain undetected by using a type of so-called fileless malware that disappears from the bank's computer systems once they are rebooted. Money taker also posed as well-known technology and financial companies such as Bank of America, Microsoft, and Yahoo in order to go unnoticed by cybersecurity teams. In order to avoid detection, the money taker group generates self-signed SSL, which are security protocol certificates, before the attack, indicating the names of popular brands in the fields instead of filling them out randomly, the report said. Group IB says it has notified Interpol and Europol about the hacking group and will assist in investigations. Now, in my other job as a fiction writer, I would look suspiciously at a few elements of this narrative. One is that the cybersecurity firm is in Russia. The hacking group is Russian-speaking. The hacking group used forged SSLs in which they purported to be major financial institutions in which they were not. So sometimes, these cybersecurity firms do the hack themselves to show how the hack can be done, and if you hire them, they'll make sure the hack never happens again. So we'll follow this story and see where it ends up. Alrighty. Our next article here is by Ian Millhiser out of Think Progress. Yep. Even Chuck Grassley thinks that Trump has gone too far. Well, it's about time, Chuck. Okay, Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, said that the White House should reconsider the judicial nominations of a horror novelist who has never tried a case and a religious right activist who said that a transgender first-grade student is part of Satan's plan. Satan. All right. The first nominee, Brett Talley, is a 36-year-old Trump administration official who bounced between political and legal jobs after graduating from law school in 2007. Well, at least he was in some sort of legal field. I mean, I know when I got out of college, I bounced between waiter and bartender jobs and occasional construction sites. Well, eventually I did end up in ER and ICU at St. Jude Hospital in Fullerton for a period of time, and then I worked for an even longer period of time with a major oil company in exploration and production. So I wouldn't blame... Well, of course, none of those were in my field of education. Isn't that amazing? So I'm not going to blame that guy. But though he is nominated for a trial judgeship in Alabama, something about Alabama water. Talley has never tried a case. He has, however, written several Lovecraftian works of fiction with titles like The Void and That Which Should Not Be. Well, as I stated earlier, in my other job as a fiction writer, I also have another job as a poet, but you never get paid for that. Jeez. But Lovecraftian, I think, is a polite way of saying that the guy's work is dense and it makes no sense. So I like to think that if one's a fiction writer, they may have critical thinking skills that are well honed, because they're crafting something, aren't they? They're crafting a story, and it's got to have an arc. But If you've ever read Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, you'll know what I'm talking about. Of course, there's a Lovecraft cult that is even, I just have to be honest today, They are much more insidious and prone to violent behaviors than even the cult of the Grateful Dead. And if you've ever known the cult of the Grateful Dead, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, the second nominee, Jeff Mateer, is a senior attorney with the Texas Attorney General's office and a former senior executive at a Christian right legal shop. That's right. They're the ones that sit down and try to find an indefinite article that they can probably move around a little bit to change the whole meaning of a legal precedent. In addition to his idiosyncratic views on the role of school children play in the devil's machinations, Mateer also defended so-called conversion therapy. Oh, God. And warned that an unlikely set of consequences will result if same-sex couples are allowed to marry. If such couples can marry, Mateer claimed in a 2015 speech, why couldn't 4 people want to get married? Why not 1 man and 3 women, or 3 women and 1 man? There are people who marry themselves. Somebody would want to marry a tree. People are marrying their pets. Well, they were doing all of that before same-sex marriage. Come on. You used to read about it in the National Enquirer, and you could just tell, you could read the whole story by looking at the headlines, waiting for the person in front of you to figure out how much coin change they have to be able to pay their $20 grocery bill. So there. CNN first reported Grassley's suggestion that Talley and Mateer's nominations should not move forward. The top senator on the Judiciary Committee said he is asking the White House to consider the Mateer nomination and that it should not proceed on the Talley nomination. And it remains to be seen whether the White House will follow Grassley's advice and send both nominations to the void. Yeah, well, I expect Trump to be, on a big rage today. So when he hears that Grassley's not taking his advice, it's just going to exacerbate it. You know how it is now. So beware. All right, so the last dish that we have coming out of the kitchen right now for your enjoyment is written by Noor al-Sabai out of Raw Story. Yesterday, Tuesday, Democrats on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee claimed that Donald Trump's nominee for the top White House environmental post appears to be guilty of plagiarism more than a dozen times over. Environment and Public Works Committee Democrats said that in written responses to the committee's questions, Kathleen Hartnett-White, who is nominated to lead the White House Council on Environmental Quality, gave answers to their questions that appeared to be copied verbatim from other Trump EPA officials, including the agency's administrator, Scott Pruitt. Now, those Democrats counted at least 18 instances that appeared to be copied from other EPA officials. An argument might be made that in her preparation, they gave her these statements and said, read this or else. So I don't know if that's plagiarism necessarily. And I'm just being devil's advocate, trying to find a reason why someone would go up and read verbatim what the secretary, the head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, wrote. And I would think that it's because she's trying to be a good soldier. In her mind, it's not plagiarism. I'm being a good soldier. But when you're given a questionnaire by Congress in these investigative hearings, committees, you're supposed to answer them. You are supposed to answer them. Which begs the question, are these people so dense they can't even put it in their own words? I don't know. I kept hearing these stories as I was growing up, and it was failing to get ahead. Like in a bureaucracy, the people that are the really good file clerks, you don't want to promote them. You want to keep them down there filing because they're really good at their job. And the people that just cannot file worth a damn, you promote their asses out of there, and pretty soon they're running everything. Except they really aren't, because it's all the competent people who are actually running everything, and you just got that person into a position where they think that they're in power. And then the world comes crashing down, and you realize, or they realize, that I'm not a leader. I don't know what to do. Oh, my hair's on fire. Okay. We are troubled that it appears you have cut and pasted from the written answers of other nominees in your responses to questions that were submitted to you. Those senators wrote in a letter to White that the Washington Examiner published yesterday. Though the Republican majority of the committee advanced White in a party line vote last month, she has not yet been confirmed by the full Senate. A former chairwoman of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, White's last employer was the Texas Public Policy Foundation. The Texas Public Policy Foundation. Alabama, Texas. Boy, I don't know. Is there something in the water? Or are there like heavy metals that are lurking to destroy proteins and synaptical ability? Maybe. It's a group that's described as a conservative think tank that has received funding from Koch Industries, ExxonMobil, Chevron, and other energy companies. She doesn't know what the hell's going on. Of course she has to have the answers given to her. Except what's being alleged here is that they weren't necessarily given to her. She just copied them down. Democrats on the Environment and Public Works Committee staunchly oppose White due to her, quote, views contrary to established science on climate change, end quote. And some of those contrary views are, she believes in the benefits of like even more CO2. Gotta have more CO2. All right. Now, I hate to admit it, but I've been in a biology class and I see what CO2 did to those lab rats. It's not good. It really isn't. All right, so why don't we clean up here at the front cafe, move everything back to the chef's table, and we'll take a little break while we do that, and we'll meet you back at the chef's table for an even more intimate discussion. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Netroots Radio, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Got a minute? Predators like wolves affect their ecosystems by eating their prey. But a more subtle impact involves fear. Predators also terrify prey species. And when, for example, elk are hiding, they don't spend as much time eating leaves. The impact of a predator down through the food web all the way to plants is called a trophic cascade. Meanwhile, fish at a coral reef near the Fiji archipelago in the South Pacific generally graze on the seaweeds that grow on the reef. But when reef sharks emerge from deeper waters, it's best to quit foraging and hide instead.
And thinking about these other ecosystems like wolves, their effects in their ecosystem don't play out in all places at all times. They happen to be most pronounced in risky habitats like river valleys or gorges.
Marine scientist Douglas Rasher from the nonprofit Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences in Maine.
So it got me thinking that maybe these shallow habitats might be the place where sharks have their most pronounced effects on the ecosystem.
At one time, researchers did not think trophic cascades even existed in the real world, and many still debate whether sharks can drive trophic cascades on coral reefs. By observing reef communities in Fiji's Votua Marine Reserve, Rasher and his team discovered that sharks do in fact influence plant growth on the reefs, by scaring the herbivorous fish away from eating them. Here's how it works. When the tide rises, sharks make hunting raids into the shallow lagoons. The fish stop eating and hide instead. But during low tide, the predators are isolated in deeper waters, unable to access the reef-enclosed lagoons. That's when the fish can safely graze.
All of the fish in this system have a very keen sense of when the tide is coming up and when the tide is going out. If you just sort of sit there and watch through the transition, you see as particularly with the large herbivores, as the tide starts to drop, they seem to know it and they jet. And it's really predictable.
The upshot is that the deeper parts of the reef are more extensively grazed, while seaweed grows more freely on the higher parts of the reef that are accessible to the fish only when they are focused on avoiding becoming a shark's lunch. The results are in the journal Scientific Reports. For Rasher, these findings mean that the question is no longer whether sharks influence the dynamics of reef plant and animal communities, but instead under what conditions they do so.
Predators can have important impacts on coral reefs, but we need to look carefully to determine when and where those important impacts exist.
Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Last year, America's largest internet provider, Comcast, took over the second largest, Time Warner. So Comcast is now a coast-to-coast beast, running its proprietary lines into 25 million of our homes. Bad enough that this market power allows the internet giant to gouge consumers, but it has an even more sinister reason for muscling up. Comcast, along with a handful of other internet service corporations, intend to eviscerate the pure egalitarian ethic of net neutrality. The great virtue of the internet is that no one controls its content. This digital communication technology has been so successful and socially valuable because it is a wide-open democratic forum, accessible on equal terms to all who want to put information, images, opinions, etc. on it, or to download any of the same from it. But if corporate powers could restrict the flow of internet communication, they could collect billions in tolls for privileged access. Thus, the real motivation behind Comcast's 2016 mega-merger was that their added market control would set them up to be the very gatekeeper that the internet community doesn't need and adamantly opposes. Want it or not, though, lobbyists for Comcast and the few other giants that own practically all of the wires that link U.S. internet users to the global web now have Donald Trump's support to let them dictate to the millions of content providers what can go through the wires and on what terms. Rather than having one big broadband freeway open for transporting everyone's internet content, these monopolists intend to create express toll lanes they can sell at a premium to the richest content providers, leaving all other providers stuck in the slow lanes. This is Jim Hightower saying, there's still time to fight back. Go to battleforthenet.com to help put a stop to this corporate coup.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes.
I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Russian President Vladimir Putin made a surprise visit to Syria on Monday, touring a Russian airbase alongside Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. It was Putin's first visit to Syria since Russian troops deployed there in 2015. Putin declared victory over terrorists in the country, and he also ordered an unspecified number of troops to return home. But Putin's announcement didn't signify a true pullout. He went on to say the Haimem Air Base, which Russian troops constructed in 2015, will remain in permanent operation, as will a Russian naval base in the city of Tartus. Protests continue to heat up across cities in the Middle East following President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the Israeli capital last week. Thousands clashed with police in the Lebanese capital of Beirut on Sunday, while thousands also gathered outside the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, Indonesia. Trump's move last week has also sparked a war of words against Israel. Turkish President Recep Erdogan declared Israel to be a terror state during a speech on Sunday, while the defense minister of Malaysia has gone as far as to say Malaysian troops could deploy to protect Palestine. And if you thought LinkedIn only generated a bunch of annoying emails and bland corporate blog posts, think again. According to the German government, the corporate networking site is at the center of a Chinese intelligence operation aimed at infiltrating elite government and business circles in Germany. On Sunday, Germany's BFV spy agency accused Chinese intelligence of using fake accounts to target prominent German professionals and try and recruit them as informants. China has denied the German allegations. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com. We've cleaned everything up in the front cafe and have set up the chef's table here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your executive chef and chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and we're curating a few special dishes for you today, and as we do in the chef's table. But first, what we do is we go over the local weather here at the mothership for Netroots Radio, and that is in the Pacific Northwest, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon. And it is currently 25 degrees. We're slated to go to a high of 55. I doubt it. So, unfortunately, some of these forecasts have been a bit off here in the previous days. We'll be lucky if we get to the mid-40s. And though the low is close to what they forecast here, they say the low 30s, it's going to be in the mid to upper 20s. Unfortunately, no precipitation, which means no snow. I better not wish for something. I may get it. The air quality index, of course, is only moderate at 98 particles per million, and people are burning wood to keep warm, so I can't blame them. But pressure is down just a tad, though we still have high pressure at 30.36 inches. Visibility is at 6 miles. And humidity is at 70% because we have had a freezing fog advisory that is still in effect. So, one fortunate thing, though, is that by the time that I drive to my sports therapy, physical therapy, to prep for my first of 2 complete knee replacements, I won't have to scrape my windows because it won't be that cold then. So that's always a good thing. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they have purchased in any number of platforms. I've gone out there, and there's some pretty elaborate ones. You could spend thousands on these little weather stations on a pole and put them in your property somewhere. And that's what these people have done. And they live around the world. Okay, London is currently 48 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 46 and cloudy with a chance for showers a bit later, but they are under a wind advisory in which could disrupt infrastructure and power and whatnot. Rome is 56 and partly cloudy, and they are under the same wind advisory. Kiev is 35 and light rain. Kabul is 30 and partly cloudy. Keeps the drones at home generally when it's cloudy and hazy. So if you're planning on having a wedding in Kabul, Afghanistan, now's the time. You don't. Otherwise, it will be a short ceremony. Hong Kong is 66, partly cloudy with wind. Tokyo is 38 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 69 and clear. San Francisco, California is 47 and partly cloudy. And New York is 25 degrees and cloudy. That is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they have purchased, and these people live around the world. All right, why don't we go ahead and dive into these dishes that, we've curated for your, deep enjoyment. The first is by Natasha Geeling out of Think Progress. Both public and private financial institutions are beginning to recognize the risks associated with investing in oil and coal as a major rebuke to Trump's climate agenda. I always say that if you need to root out where corruption may be originating, and the old adage is follow the money. I would also say that a very maybe dissimilar ancillary to that anecdote is that if you really want to know what's going on in the world, follow the actuaries. Yes, indeed. They've been declining policies and, tidal flood zones for a while now. I think they know something. Two major financial institutions, one public and one private, announced on Tuesday, that was yesterday, of course, that they would be significantly paring down their investment in fossil fuel projects, signaling a shift in the way financial institutions assess the risks associated with fossil fuels and climate change. During the One Planet Summit taking place in Paris, France this week, the World Bank announced that it would no longer finance upstream oil and gas, meaning any projects that involve oil and gas exploration or production after 2019, making exceptions only for extreme cases. Well, like when you need to drill and transport really toxic sulfurated oil through a fishery in Alaska. That kind of extreme case. No, they don't want it. But we're going to do it. And that Trump's going to go and do the exact opposite of what these guys want. Oh, one ancillary is that during this meeting, Macron awarded multi-million-dollar each grants to 13 U.S. scientists who have been kicked out of their government positions, and they can take up residence in Paris to continue their research for the term of Trump's, or for the term of, or duration of Trump's term. And I don't know. He being Macron, may be thinking Trump's term may be pretty short. So, but I thought that was something. Okay, in a separate announcement also made at the One Planet Summit, insurance giant AXA, which is based in France but does business all over the world, said that it would no longer invest in or insure tar sands projects or U.S. pipelines. All right. Let's See, because the World Bank already has a commitment in place restricting support for coal-fired power plants and thermal coal mining, the announcement essentially means that the World Bank will be cease to finance all fossil fuel projects by 2019. AXA also said that it would quadruple its efforts to divest from companies that make at least 30% of their profits from coal. Well, it's human nature to kill every last whale because, when we need whale oil to, not only to light our homes, but to lubricate the machinery of business. We need whale oil to lubricate the machinery of business, and we got to kill every last whale for that oil. And then where will we get it? Well, you know what? There's this newfangled contraption called an oil well. Weird. And they're taking this stuff that feels a little bit like whale oil. Smells a little different, but it feels like it. That's how progress happens, folks. So let's hope that the next technology that we choose doesn't foul the earth as much as all the other advances in technologies that we've acquired over the eons. AXA began divesting from coal in 2015, but on Tuesday committed to selling off more than $28 billion worth of investments in companies that derive more than a third of their revenue from coal. The company also announced that it would immediately stop insuring 3 major pipelines that carry tar sands fuel from Canada to refineries throughout North America, though it did not specifically name the pipelines that would no longer be insured through AXA. Well, that's because you can just count them on your fingers how many there are. And they're all leaking. No wonder they don't want to insure them anymore. Can you imagine the payouts? I mean, the sulfurated, ugly, foul tar sands oil leaking all over that pristine farmland. Yeah, no wonder they don't want to insure it. The payouts are going to be enormous. European banks, BNP Paribas, and ING also recently announced that they would divest from tar sands oil, which is one of the most carbon-intensive types of fuel. And in November, Norges Bank, the Central Bank of Norway, told the Norwegian government that it would divest its 1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world, of all oil and gas shares, which account for about 6% of the fund's assets. Do you think the Koch brothers are going to be pissed when they hear this? I think they are. Of course, the Koch brothers are moving into other forms of energy. You know it. Or maybe not energy, maybe they'll just go into politics completely. They're all in. I hear it's a growth industry. You can make a lot of money in politics now. Transferring wealth from the Treasury right into your own offshore account somewhere. I don't know. Could be Panama. Might be the Cayman Islands, or it might be somewhere. I don't know. Greece is always nice. Or at least that part of the Mediterranean. Multilateral development banks like the World Bank provide more than $9 billion in public finance to fossil fuel projects in 2016, the year after nearly 200 nations agreed to hold the planet to well below 2 degrees centigrade. That would be 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit of warming in the Paris Climate Agreement, which we, as a United States nation, decided, we're not going to do it. Now, actually, as a nation, we wanted to do it, but this guy up there, with his weird hair. Fortunately, states and cities showed up. U.S. states and cities showed up at the Paris meeting, and they're on board. It's not trivial, the bank's commitment. It's a pretty significant amount of finance that they're going to be moving. Well, of course. $4.7 billion, or around $1 billion, was invested that would qualify as an upstream oil and gas project. They were investing $4.7 billion, and $1 billion of that was in upstream. What is exploration and production is what they mean. Okay. In August, the Treasury Department rescinded an Obama-era guidance that made it more difficult for multilateral banks to finance coal operations overseas. Instead, issuing a guidance that directed the department to help countries access and use fossil fuels more cleanly and efficiently. Burn it all up. Once it's burned, it's gone. I don't know. It's almost like, these guys that just want to destroy the Earth through climate change know that there's a big asteroid or meteor or comet headed our way, and it won't matter anyway. What nihilists? Oh, no. Actually, it's Christmas time, and now that they're going to change the capital of Israel and Jerusalem and all that, it's the end of the world. It happens every Christmas, which is supposed to be about rebirth and renewal. But you can't have rebirth and renewal without, the thing that comes right before the rebirth. I guess that's how the construct is. How does that apply to climate change? Well, these people believe only God can control the climate, forgetting what we did with the Dust Bowl. Yeah, puny humans caused the Dust Bowl. And we may be puny humans, but we are a proud lot. Are we not? Yes, indeed we are. All right, so for our final dish on this repast, we offer you a story by Sidney Pereira out of Newsweek. Charles Darwin, the scientist renowned for his work on the theory of natural selection, detailed his life through thousands of letters over the course of his life. One of those letters details Darwin's reconciliation between the belief of an all-creating God and the naturalist theory of evolution, and it was sold for $125,000 yesterday at a New York auction. That was over twice the expected price. In the 3-page letter, Darwin concludes that squaring religion and science is, in his words, insoluble. The letter was a response to a reader's question about Darwin's 1859 landmark publication on the origin of species. The reader wanted Darwin to explain, in 2 or 3 words, whether his theory destroys the evidence of the existence of God looked at through nature's phenomena. The reader, James Grant, made the request in 1878. Nearly 2 decades after On the Origin of Species was first published. Darwin, who was 69, responded, refusing to put science and religion at odds with each other. He argued that the strongest evidence of God's existence is the intuition that people feel that, in Darwin's words here now, there must have been an intelligent beginner of the universe. But he also wrote, then comes the doubt and the difficulty whether such intuitions are trustworthy. Well, you can always fall back on the old adage that God works in mysterious ways. There you go. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but if God's going to work in mysterious ways, I think that's a message that we have to use our own volition and moral core in which to proceed. Okay? Yes, we are self-programming autonomous machines. Put us on our way. Darwin does not make clear whether he himself believes in God. He noted that answering the question in full would require an essay and, quote, for this I have not the strength, being much out of health. And Darwin died 4 years later in his home in England and was buried a few days later in Westminster Abbey. Darwin's religious beliefs were perpetually questioned, as he was assumed to be an atheist after he published On the Origin of Species. He and his wife Emma discussed Christianity openly until the death of their eldest daughter at 10 years old. After their daughter's death, Darwin's wife became more religious, and Darwin avoided speaking about religion out of love for her. Letters about Darwin's thoughts on the implications on the theory of natural selection for religion are exceptionally rare, and it is believed to be one of 2 that have ever been auctioned. Sotheby's, where the letter was sold, has been auctioning artifacts and works of art since 1744 to collectors. That's the year 1744. They've been doing that. And today has 80 locations in 40 countries. Another 70 science and technology items were up for grabs at Sotheby's, including the first edition of René Descartes' Discourse on the Method, which coined the phrase, I think, therefore I am. Other items for sale include the 1954 Nobel Prize medal awarded to Frederick C. Robbins for his work leading to the development of the polio vaccine. Letters from Albert Einstein were also on offer, including one called Freudian Analysis and Quitting Smoking, in which he takes a humorous approach to the man who advised him to quit smoking. Right, this is the full text of Darwin's letter on his doubts of God's existence to Mr. Grant, dated March 11th, 1878, private. Dear Sir, I should have been very glad to have aided you in any degree if it had been in my power. But to answer your question would require an essay, and for this I have not the strength, being much out of health. Nor, indeed, could I have answered it distinctly and satisfactorily without any amount of strength. The strongest argument for the existence of God, as it seems to me, is the instinct, or intuition, which we all, as I suppose, feel that there must have been an intelligent beginner of the universe. But then comes the doubt and difficulty whether such intuitions are trustworthy. I've touched on one point of difficulty in the last 2 pages of my variation of animals and plants under domestication, but I am forced to leave the problem insoluble. No man who does his duty has anything to fear, and may hope for whatever he earnestly desires. Dear Sir, yours faithfully, Charles Darwin. All right. Well, thousands of letters we're talking about. So they weren't really able to clip and paste back in the day. So, I had to make it quick. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for today. So we'll be cleaning up the chef's table here. And we'll have the front cafe open bright and early tomorrow as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy opens its doors for another day of fantastic broadcast on Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. That'll be our daily special for tomorrow, so I hope that you show up for that. We have some great content. I'm sure Tom Hartman, Randy Rhodes throughout the day will be speaking in earnest about quite a tectonic shift in our political structure, and maybe Alabama is the canary in the coal mine. We can only hope. All right, folks, we'll be back here bright and bushy at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I hope you join us. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.